Hey everyone, Thyworm here. Trade confirmed. Grab your pitchforks, but it's happening. At least I think so, and I'll tell you why. Starting with Part 1, some history, but not too much because you will likely know it. Here is basically what happened. When last Epoch was kickstarted in April 2018, trade was mentioned explicitly as a feature, and the devs clearly stated it is one of the most enjoyable parts of an ARPG. During the following years of development, from 2019 until 2022, trading was occasionally discussed by the devs in the form of the Bazaar until December 22nd, 2022, where lead developer Tresoki made a post saying that trading would not be in the game. This didn't go down well. Everyone made a video about it, I made a video about it, and in that video I said I just couldn't believe the devs would throw away all the years of hard work, blood, sweat and tears to have a game without an economy, without trade. I called it a big mistake and predicted that the devs would get back on this topic because there's just no way this is how you manage your live service ARPG game. And what do you know? Yesterday, February 3rd, 2023, a survey was released to the public with various questions regarding trade, ranging from do you want trade, to which items do you think should be tradable, to how you feel about nerfing drop rates. Bringing us to Part 2, the post. I'm not gonna go into the survey questions here, I'll link it in the description, you can fill it in yourself. What I will do is try to place this survey into context, and that context is the post, for starters. The wording of the post that accompanies the survey is very interesting. This is deliberate, there is no way this was written and not checked by at least 3 people. First, the devs acknowledged the feedback and many, including me, weren't happy. Of course they weren't, I'll get into this later. The post goes on with this, quote, "It's entirely possible that we were incorrect when we concluded there wasn't a more expansive trade system that would both satisfy people who want trade and not overshadow item drops and crafting," end quote. They basically want the game primarily to revolve around gameplay and finding items and crafting, but it seems they have changed their stance significantly because this leaves the door open for trade, as long as it doesn't overshadow item drops and crafting, whatever that may mean in practice. You could argue that is what the survey tries to find out. But it gets more interesting, quote, "If you would prefer last Epoch not to have trade, please still answer the questions from the perspective of what types of trade you would be most okay with," end quote. This sentence is critical. Here the devs are basically saying we will get trade, because they're asking you to fill in the survey even if you don't want to have trade, as if you would still get trade. They're asking the trade haters to take the perspective of trade being in the game and fill in the form from that perspective. But even if you think I'm reaching here, think about this. Imagine the following situation and think about the odds of this happening. What do you think the odds are that 1. EHG concluded to make a post to begin with, regurgitating this trade issue in the middle of their online public testing event, risking their reputation once again. 2. Go through the lengths of creating a post and a survey. 3. Knowingly getting the hopes up of basically anyone enjoying trade. And then 4. Still decide to not change a single thing regarding trade. So they make all these decisions and do all this effort and risk their reputation again to not change a single thing? It's not gonna happen, people. Those odds are below 0, ladies and gentlemen. There's absolutely no way that after all of this, the devs stand their ground on the trade topic and that it will remain limited to gifting. 0 chance, no matter the outcome of this survey. Let's dive into some theories of what's really going on here. Part 3, the anchoring theory. I think my interpretation of the post is not reaching, but this topic certainly is. It is a bit far-fetched, I'll be the first to admit it, but I still feel this could be a decent explanation of what's going on. There's this concept of anchoring, and game developers and managers and people in the financial enterprise I work for, they do it all the time. What you're basically doing is taking a rather extreme point of view, such as saying that the MTX of a cape is going to cost $80, which is setting the anchoring point, and then after the expected community backlash, you make the MTX $50, which was your intended price to begin with. in the minds of the gaming community, the backlash was successful, and for the devs it was successful too because they still got their ridiculously overpriced MTX. I can totally see the same thing happening here with trade in last Epoch. I think it's entirely possible this whole thing was at least somewhat expected, because I find it really hard to believe that EHG decided to not have trade without overseeing the consequences. I don't believe they are that disconnected from the ARPG community. Surely they must have known how people would feel, and now with the anchoring point being set at no trade, and after the expected community backlash, we're talking about introducing trade. This allows the devs to create a form of trade while putting it into a community narrative. The biggest counter-argument to this theory, however, is twofold. First, it's a rather cynical take, and second, the trading idea was already there. It was the expectation all along. But that means that at the very least, the devs were genuinely surprised by the backlash, which has me worried. Because literally everyone saw this coming, of course. Or there's something else going on, like they just felt they had to cut this content to meet some sort of decent timeline, right? We haven't had content for a year. Maybe the trade and cutting it out allowed them to sort of release the game into some manageable time frame. That is definitely an option. Bringing me to part 4, the community impact. Maybe anchoring is too far-fetched. How about the community? Recently, someone in my comments section replied that it doesn't really matter what the current community of Last Epoch thinks about the game, because they're already playing the game. They've paid for the game. They tested the game. Their job is done, and it's a very small community still, all things considered. I liked this observation. If you're part of the discourse online within the LE community, or you're someone watching this video, or the Last Epoch streams, you're likely not a casual gamer. Some of you are, and I appreciate you. I'm actually advocating for you here. But a lot of viewers, current LE players and the overall community will be pretty hardcore ARPG fans, dedicating significant hours to the game. For the devs, if you're mostly communicating with that audience, you may get a skewed or flawed perspective of your game. You may be able to please the current existing community, and especially at the start this is vital because it's all you have, but in the long run you can't rely on that community anymore. You have to attract other people. This is another reason why I feel trade is coming for sure, because it's not our opinions that matter, it's the opinions of those not playing the game, and those have spoken quite loudly. I think 11th Hour Games realized this way too late, the importance of new players, judging by two big decisions that were made in the development of the game. First, the emphasis on co-op. I mean specifically playing with other people. Online and server authoritative is great, nobody has ever debated that, but co-op, I think they're seeing now, in the current 10k event that's going on, that the numbers are just basically terrible. I'm looking at the relative numbers here, but currently the game performs at around 30% of its peak user count. Not that many people were waiting for co-op apparently, as they thought, which they could have known by just looking at the market. Who plays ARPGs in co-op? Not that many people, ladies and gentlemen. I feel this was always totally overstated as a selling point, and the numbers tell a similar story. The second big decision was of course trade. This is the whole point, this is what we're covering. My point here is that throughout the last year or so, some big decisions have been made that may have favored the existing player base, but didn't look at the bigger picture, the people that still need to play Last Epoch for the first time. Those are the important people now. Those will keep the game growing. The vast majority of those are casual ARPG enjoyers and PoE players. All of the marketing that has been done so far has been done using PoE streamers, but your average PoE player is not gonna have fun in Last Epoch without trade. Those people, the average casual PoE enjoyer, requires trade in order to enjoy the game without having to grind for specific uniques in order to play a build they like. Without trade, they're just not interested, or at least not as invested, and you need this part of the audience to be invested because they will also buy NTX and keep the game alive at the start of each cycle. Part of the reason they're casual is because they do have a life, and with a life comes disposable income which they can use on some cosmetics. Part 5. Momentum. I think another reason why the devs are backtracking a bit on trade is because the game is clearly losing momentum and they feel the need to somehow steer this ship around. I think the overall expectation was, of both devs and community, myself included, that the invitational event and now the 10k beta would see a surge in player numbers and interest for the game, measured by Twitch viewers for example, but that's not happening. Numbers for the 10k test are not looking great. The 10k Pack the Server event just finished and 2200 concurrent players were in, which is way less than the 7k concurrent people they once had. People are not returning, at least not for this event, and they all have access. You have to remember that all of those people that used to play, they can play the game now. Which is concerning because maybe players won't return for the 0.9 patch either, and you can't blame them if you don't care about co-op. Last Epoch, gameplay wise, may be in a decent spot, but in terms of perception, interest and player numbers, it certainly isn't. The trade decision is definitely part of that, as is of course not adding content for a year. I think this has also influenced the decision to claw back on trade. Bringing us to the last part, part 6, what trade will we get? I hope I gave enough arguments as to why trade is required and why it will happen. Time will tell, but mark my words, let's say it happens, trade. The question is then, in what form? It's not gonna be completely open trade, although that would likely be the best for the game, because it means depending on builds, meta and online economy, everything will have value, meaning you can play the game however you want. It is what makes Path of Exile so appealing, and it's an aspect of trade often overlooked in my opinion. But completely open trade would probably be too far away from their initial vision, and it would overshadow finding items and crafting. It is still debatable at this point if it's actually true, but there are some decent arguments as to why that would happen. Talking about arguments, just looking at my own arguments here, primarily making sure a more casual part of the audience can enjoy trade, you need to be able to trade at the very least unique items and set items, because they are build defining. You could debate about uniques with legendary potential on it, but at least the base versions have to be tradable. I feel uniques with legendary potential should be tradable too. There's still some decent RNG after that and a dungeon you have to clear. And the same is true for items that have not been crafted on. So we're ending up with base uniques, base set items and of course base rare items. And then that's probably all you need for now. You could debate about crafting materials. Fully crafted items are unlikely to be tradable because of the overshadowing we discussed. There are consequences, I am not oblivious to this. I am sure some uniques will have their drop chances nerfed, of course. But hey, something's gotta give. The real question here is if we want to tailor the game to a small community that enjoys solo self-found, which the game is now effectively, and once again I am part of that community, I do play solo self-found in PoE. Or alternatively, do we want to tailor the game towards future success and content? I would still rather play Last Epoch in 4 years with a ton of new content than slowly see the game die because less and less people are interested in playing it. We're not gonna get that new content without a bunch of new players. We're not gonna appeal to new players without some form of trade, so something needs to happen here or this game is doomed. And it seems the devs have reached a similar conclusion. Thanks for watching and making it to the end. See you soon. Love you all. Bye bye.